Okay, so what I want to do with you tonight is we're going to just do some recapping of information and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And by the way, this is posted for you. It was sent out in the announcement today. But can everybody see my screen okay? 3 steps to data analysis. All right, so what we're going to do is just kind of walk back through what it means to analyze data, and then I want to talk to you a little bit more specifically. Okay, great, we analyze it, then what? So let's talk first about, we're going to skip that because you can read all that. So basically, when you're talking about data, and I think sometimes it can be a little bit confusing, and I hate the fact that EDL 700 and EDL 707 are 2 distinct courses, because in my head, they really are the same course and the same kind of information. Because in an ideal world, you do data analysis in a data team meeting. But that data team meeting should be structured like a professional learning community. And a professional learning community should be talking about data. So with that being said, when you get your data, the first thing you need to do is analyze results. We've talked about this. But remember, when you're analyzing results, it should not be a solo act. It should be something that's done in collaboration with other people. You know, principals, and I was guilty of this too, oftentimes will get the data and they think they're doing the teachers a huge favor by doing all of the analyzation and disaggregation for them. When in reality, the people who are closest to the data, i.e. teachers, are the people who need to get messy with the data. They need to get in there and look at it and analyze it and scrutinize it and question it and all of those pieces. So it's very important that data doesn't exist in isolation, and it's nice and wonderful if somebody else does the disaggregation, but in reality, it's not very useful to the user when that's been done. When I was in Dallas as an assistant superintendent, we had this great idea that we needed data coordinators. So we hired people who literally did all of our data analysis for every school, every teacher, all that. And I started realizing it was good, but it wasn't really what we needed. So I sort of changed my coordinator's roles and responsibilities into helping us figure out what kind of data we needed to be looking at, and then to put it into usable chunks. But we did the actual disaggregation. It's not enough just to analyze, you also have to communicate those findings. And one of the things we've looked at and written about are data storytelling, and how that can be so helpful in making sense of data for people by putting it into a usable sort of format. And then, of course, even if we analyze and we communicate, but we don't actually act upon the data and use it to improve our programs and enrich our students, then we're really missing the boat. These 3 things must happen for there to be strong data analysis, data usage, and to improve student achievement. So remember, with data, keep it simple. You know, not all of us are not statisticians, and all of us don't really want to understand all the complex algorithms. Keeping it simple is really important. I'm reminded of when I was the principal at MacArthur and Irving, I had an assistant principal who was responsible for assessment, data, testing, all of that. That's all he did. He didn't do discipline or anything else. And Jim, by all accounts, was brilliant. I mean, he has a PhD in statistics, so obviously the man's brilliant. And he created this algorithm that, based on past achievement results, because remember, we were high school, so we usually had several years of that, of data and information on our students. He could predict with 97% accuracy how well students would do on our state assessments. I mean, it was really pretty remarkable. And I'll never forget, Jim was one of those people who thought we all loved math and statistics as much as he did. So he was so excited when he finally finished this algorithm. In fact, we actually presented at several national conferences on this. It was really pretty groundbreaking stuff that he was doing back in 2002. And he wanted to explain to me the algorithm. And I remember sitting there trying to follow him and listen when all I cared about was the fact that he had a 97% accuracy rate with predictive analysis. And I finally looked at him and I said, Jim, in 1 minute or less, I want you to tell me what you need to tell me. It was extremely hard for him to do that, but my point with him was you're making this so complex that the really important part of the data, that 97% accuracy rate, is getting lost in all this other stuff that I don't need to know, I don't understand, and I'm never going to be able to apply that algorithm myself. That's why I have you. So that has always reminded me how important it is to keep it simple and systemic. And remember, keep your audience in mind. If he had said that to the rest of my teachers on staff, they would have gotten up and walked out because it was so confusing. So it's all about usability and simplicity. It doesn't have to be complex. Remember, there are two kinds of data: quantitative, that's the numerical stuff, and qualitative, which is often anecdotal or can be something that is expressed in words or phrases or sentences, etc. Quantitative, I just told you that. So it's things like demographic data, attendance, standardized. This is how most often we look at data in education, is through a quantitative lens. Qualitative can be logs, experiences, focus groups, notes, etc. Just as important and helpful and beneficial as quantitative data, but still very difficult to quantify. Okay? So remember too, back from your days in mathematics, that we will always have with our data a mean, that is our average, our median, which is the middle point, different than an average. So let's say that we have scores that range from 2 to 100. Okay, well, we know what the average would be. The median would actually be 52, which is different than the average. The range is what I just said. Lowest score was 2, highest score is 100. That is the range, the lowest point and the highest point. We will also have frequency distribution. So if you've ever done tallies or tabulations, like of votes or something like that, we used to use frequency distributions when we did our cheerleader tryout results, because that was how we figured out where the break point was. So everybody may be clustered near the top with, let's say you could get 100 votes, and everybody's up there around 90 to 100. Then the next group of girls maybe would have between 40 and 60 votes. Then you'd have another group that was clustered down at the bottom. So we use those frequency distributions to set a cut point. So instead of saying we will have 8 cheerleaders, we looked at frequency distributions and made our cut points. And so it would vary from year to year. So, you know, if our cut point was at 80, we might have 12 cheerleaders this year. Next year, our cut point was 90 because we had higher scores. We might have 15. It just depended. That's a frequency distribution. Percentage distribution, same idea. It's just based on a percentage as opposed to an actual number. So, you know, again, you might be saying, well, most of our students scored between 85% and 96%. That's your first percentage distribution. Our next set of students, the next group scored between 62% and 73% on down the line. Same idea, but based on percentages. Okay. So here we, again, talk about frequency distribution, so you can see what it looks like numerically. Percentage distributions, again, the same thing. So this is how the answer to this question came out. Graphing frequency data, so you can graph it both by number and percentage. And most often, too, for us, we really deal a lot in percentages because raw numbers don't have meaning unless you know the total amount of the group and where they fall. Okay, so again, just another graphic way to show it. Means and medians, so you have, you know, your mean is, of course, your average. Your median is your middle point. Sorry, that just turned out really funky. Sorry. So this might be your mean, your average. Then here is your mean, okay, which is different. I mean, your average, excuse me. Then your median is 94. Because remember, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 scores. So you have 3 scores here, you have 3 scores here, so that means your middle score is 94. Mean is just, you simply would add these together, divide by, what did I say, 7, and you get your average, or median, okay? So this, again, is just showing you some distributions or ranges. So you have a range of 40 to 100 in this case, 40 to 98. So in this case, your median would be, you've got 40, 50, 55, then 100, 100, 100. So your median is 94. And in the same case, you still have a median of 94, but look how different your numbers actually are. So your average would be substantially different. Okay, so they show you the average 81, average 87. A histogram is very much just a chart that you chart the frequency. I'm not going to walk you through all these. Cross tabulations, you'll get more into this if you actually go on and get your doctorate. And when you take EDL 740 with Dr. Coulter. So we're not going to go into all that because it's really not that important, quite frankly, for what the purpose of this course is. You can also look at and use bar graphs to compare a score versus and by individual groups. So you might often see this, that the percentage passing is over here. Here is the grade level or the test, and then you will notice it's broken. It could be broken down maybe by subgroup. So you'll often see right here, let's say that our percentage is from 0 to 100. This is based on, let's say, 4th grade math. So this might be an actual objective within that, so maybe measurement, and then you might have your Hispanic students, your Black students, your white students, etc. Okay, so same idea here, just graphed a little bit differently. So you guys have seen all this, and this. Do you guys get actual data sheets from your state testing? Or do you get it just when it's been aggregated? I see Kel shaking his head. I know in Texas, we got an individual sheet for every single student. So it had all of their information. So this is one format. I know in Texas, ours came basically as graphs. This is one that's how somebody wrote up an interview. Okay. And we've talked about sharing, know your audience, how you might report it. It can be a written report. You might put together a data book. It could be a flyer, a formal oral presentation, etc. One of the things that I found was very effective as a principal, I did a one-pager every year that summarized our major data points. So, for example, at the high school level, it was our graduation exam. And it broke it down by student group and how we did. I broke down, we had our ACT scores on there, our SAT, etc. And I always compared ours to everybody else in our district, as well as to the state, as well as to the national. I kept it pretty simple. Like I said, it was only one page. It was very little writing, just some graphs. And parents found that particularly helpful. We would also make posters of those and put them around the school because, again, that visual was important, and then we post it on our website. Keep it simple. Okay? All right? So whatever strategy you decide how you want to report this, make sure that it is actually linked to your outcomes, including your successes and challenges. So when I do that one pager, we would do sort of a supplement about here's where we did really well and what we're doing to maintain that. Here are our areas of weakness, and here's what we're doing to improve that. Very important for our community and our parents to know and understand, as well as our students. And then, like I said, ours was backed up with those data tables. And, you know, we were very transparent about we're really having trouble with this one. And we even included things parents could do at home and students could do individually. So let's say the gap for us was maybe in vocabulary. So we would ask parents to do certain activities or to use certain words or whatever. But everything was linked together back to the data. So when you're thinking about improving instruction and assessment, you have to go beyond just instruction in the classroom and communicating data with your teachers. You have other constituents that your data matters to greatly. And when you get them involved and get them to help you, you can actually really make some monumental gains. So if you go back to the whole idea of communicating findings, think about your audience. What does my staff need to know? What does my school board need to know? I know I was in a school in Dallas when I was at Booker T. Washington. We had over $30 million of donations to our campus to actually rebuild it. It was amazing. It was a private-public partnership. $30 million from the district, $30 million from people who wrote checks. In addition to that, we had $1 million endowment, which is highly unusual in a public school. My funders wanted to know how I was doing, and data mattered a lot to them. So they actually got very detailed information, more detailed than we sent to the school board. Our partners, we had a very robust mentoring program So we actually shared individual student data with student mentors so that they could help us and support us. Data is very important if you're going to write for grants or funding. And then we had a public side too, because we were a magnet school and parents had to opt to apply to come to the school. It was not like you had to have a certain achievement level to get there. You just had to have some artistic ability or ability in the arts, I should say. So our public was always looking at us. So we put our stuff right out there on the website. We were very transparent with it. So know your audience and plan accordingly. So, depending on my audience, that flyer was best for my parents. My roundtable worked really well with my funders. Those posters, I had them up all over the building because I constantly had people coming in and visiting. And quite honestly, a lot of people took pictures of them and asked me if they could replicate them for their particular interest or whatever. And then I set our website. Okay, so how do you organize it? Again, what is sort of the overview? What did you do? How well did we do it? We chose to quantify a lot of it because it was just a lot easier. But remember too, always be looking, and I think AYP has forced us all to do this, look at our subgroup differences. You know, it was really telling for us. I know at Booker T, surprisingly, my white and Hispanic students were scoring very close to each other. There was no gap between their achievement, but our black students were substantially behind, and there was a huge gap. So we really put a lot of time, attention, and energy into closing those gaps. And within 3 years, we were very pleased to see that those subgroup differences had absolutely been eliminated. And so we began now sharing our data where we started 3 years ago and where we were 3 years later. So in addition to current data, we actually tracked historically so people could see that, gosh, they did tackle this issue and improved achievement for all students. Okay, so thinking about how you want to implement programs, base it on your data. Again, this is just some information about how you would actually maybe look at your program. And then there is actually a great website, Internet, I think is how it's pronounced, internet.org, that I've given you the link to, that they have all kinds of cool templates and then sort of ways that you can follow through to do this. So I actually went to one of their training sessions as part of the Innovation Network, and really, really good, solid tools that can be used. So let me stop sharing this. Okay. So let me kind of regroup here for just a second. So in addition to the data analysis, once you know what your data is, you have to plan for effective instruction. So it starts with the data, then you move into planning and teaching and best practices. Then you have to circle back and you've got to do some more assessment. So that whole circle, or that CIA triad of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, happens constantly. So you'll learn more in other courses about some best practices from a curriculum standpoint, instruction, and all of that. But don't forget that regardless of where you start with your data, make sure there is linkage between every piece of that cycle. So it's not just data done for data's sake, but data done to drive instruction. Instruction that is driven by assessment. Assessment that's driven by data. They all have to interact and work together. Otherwise, like I said, we're just doing data for really no purpose or reason. Okay? All right. What questions, comments, concerns do you have for me tonight? I think the DataWise book really shows that cycle. You know, it looks almost like kind of a backwards 9. Really shows that cycle. And the whole idea is that it is truly cyclical or a spiral in terms of the way you do that. That you're constantly here coming around and then you come back and go around again. It's never actually done. Okay? All right. Are y'all just like, it is the first day of school, or I'm stuck in professional development and I'm just so over all of this today, or down to the wire, I've finished almost all the assignments for the class, Tracy, let me go home. Which I will not take offense at. I understand. I don't know how y'all are even still standing at this point tonight. So
well, Tracy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Walter. Yeah, I was echoing what both of them just said, this is our first day back for teachers. I've been summer all along, working all along summer, but everything that we've been working with the last couple of days is looking at data, looking at how data plays a part in what we do. Every training I've had this summer has been on looking at the data, and now that we have our scores, our next step is very much like we're talking about. It goes in a cycle. I mean, we look at what we had last year, we look at what we did, how we've grown, and the same questions we asked last year, when we looked at the data, we're asking them again. And the DataWise book does a very good job of describing it. As I'm reading it, I'm going, yeah, this is exactly what we're doing right now. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thanks, Walter. I appreciate that. I agree with you. You know, I've read many data books, and quite honestly, I think the DataWise book is probably the simplest, easiest to use. There is another one that's called Data. I'm typing it in for you guys in the chat room. Data-Driven Instruction by Paul Bambrick Santoy. I'm spelling the wrong Santoy.
That's the actual book they use here in Caddo as the basis for the data cycle that we go through now. Matter of fact, we had quite a few administrators and supervisors go to University of Virginia and actually meet with Paul Fabric and get a lot of that just directly from him. So yeah, I'm very.
Yeah, thanks, Walter. Yeah, I've done a lot of work with Paul as well, multiple training sessions, discussions, dialogues, and stuff. One thing that I like about his book, if you actually buy the book and go on Amazon, you can find it pretty cheap. It includes a CD. And on that CD, there are multiple, everything he talks about in his book, templates and all that kind of stuff, he actually gives you that as a resource that you can download and use. So like I said, it's a pretty user-friendly book. Like I said, I'm biased. I like DataWise better. I think it makes a little more sense than what Paul asks you to do. His is pretty cumbersome in some places, but it's still a great resource. And I know many school districts have adopted his process. Like I said, DataWise also came out of Harvard. And it's funny, Paul's stuff, even though he's actually physically located, his schools are on the East Coast, a lot of the Southern and Western schools use his stuff, whereas the more Eastern schools are using DataWise. So, you know, just whichever one works better for you, but both great resources. So I'm glad, Walter, that you guys are using that. That's exciting. Okay, any other comments or questions? I responded to some more stuff in the virtual office, and hopefully grades are pretty much caught up. If not, bear with me. I should get through everything by tomorrow that's been submitted, but just let me know. Okay, y'all are like, hallelujah, we're done 32 minutes early tonight. So thank you to those of you that had your first day. Relax, get some rest. Be thankful it's a 3-day week. For those of you that are in professional development, God love you. I'm so glad I don't have to do that anymore. And we wish you well when you start up school. Y'all have a great night. Thanks.
You too.